Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 97 of Fracking Nightmare. And as you can see, I'm joined in the studio tonight by Brian Gerrish, who is one of the UK Column Partnership, who have very kindly allowed me to use their studio on
pleasure as always.
Monday nights for the last 3 years now.
Yeah, excellent.
Well, I must confess, Brian, I never expected to get to episode 97. I don't know what I expected, but we're fast approaching episode 100. And in fact, on episode 100, I will be joined at the desk here by Mike Robinson, the other part of the UK Column Partnership. And we'll be reflecting with Mike, because Mike sat the other side of the studio wall, listening in on all the shows that we have put out over the last 3 years. And we'll be looking back at, I would say, some of the highlights or lowlights or significant events over the course of that 3 years.
All highlights. They've got to be highlights, Ian, because it took place, you got the information out and it's made a difference, so it's all positive.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think, even if I did expect to get to 97 or 100 or whatever, I didn't expect that we would reach that number of episodes without the country actually experiencing another hydraulic fracturing operation, and that is, of course, the case.
Yep. So there we are. It's all good news, and we need good news on the eve of...
On the eve, yes, the eve of the presidential election. So let's just sort of take because this is going to be a factor in the geopolitical arena, because by Wednesday morning, we could be waking up in the UK to find the world in a totally different geopolitical ballgame. If Hillary gets into office, and as we've discussed elsewhere, George Soros, of course, has stated previously that Hillary will be gifted the White House even if Donald Trump wins the popular vote. And that, as we'll discuss a little bit later, could have a significant impact on the energy policy, not just of the UK, but of really the whole of the world.
Couple that with a war.
Yes, well, I think that's a key element.
I think it absolutely is. So you say, where's that war going to take place? Syria, or we're going to see something starting off in Eastern Europe? That's going to affect all of the oil markets. We need fracking, and as you say, the net result is anybody who challenges fracking will be a traitor to their own country.
It will be unpatriotic to mount any opposition to an agenda that has to support the war effort. Now, I appreciate that many viewers of Fracking Nightmare may not actually be familiar with the sort of deep geopolitical agenda. That's something that we address on a different show called Humanity versus Insanity. And actually tonight, earlier this evening, we had a remarkable lady on the programme, a lady by the name of Judith Very Baker, who was actually the former lover of Lee Harvey Oswald. And unfortunately, in 45 minutes, we didn't necessarily have the opportunity to explore as much as we might like. But in many respects, she senses that the world is in a very, very similar situation to that which it was in the early 60s, i.e. the Bay of Pigs, the Cuba crisis, and now what we have is a Syria crisis.
Absolutely. And what did she say? That somebody had to go. It was either going to be Castro or... Yeah,
one of the two had to be
Kennedy.
assassinated.
One or other had to go. And so the climate there, potential murder of a president, the CIA operating, mafia operating, seems to me exactly the same picture around Hillary Clinton.
And of course, the Hillary Clinton body count is something that's truly staggering. I mean, this goes back sort of 30-odd years, that anybody who has crossed the Clinton path has met with an untimely demise, and some remarkable of deaths have actually been attributed to suicide, when the evidence would suggest that something else actually took place.
As normal. What I can't remember is how many deaths it is. 68, is it? That's the figure in my...
I mean, I have a list that's 53, 53 that are irrefutable. And then, yes, there are others that certainly go beyond that.
But we need to elect this lady as President of the United States. Safe pair of hands for America. Never mind the weapons, never mind Benghazi, never mind the emails, never mind the drugs, never mind the children. this is the woman who needs to be president. And is it any wonder that President Putin is saying, how can I form foreign policy when America is going to be led by this sort of person?
By a socio-psychopath. I mean, she is the epitome of the socio-psychopath, and she is quite probably the most manipulable person on the planet due to the number of skeletons that she and Bill have in the closet.
Yeah, I think this is the key thing, and I said to you just before we started, you look at Obama and you say, what sort of man is he? I don't think he's particularly intelligent. I think he's capable of playing a role. He was trained for his role. He's followed along, but is he deeply intelligent? I don't think so. Hillary Clinton, smart lady, but very dangerous. So you've got a combination of intelligence and a malevolent intent. That's your psychopath or sociopath, whatever you want to call her. Interesting times.
Not an ounce of humanity on show. Well, obviously, this is a little bit outside of our normal fare for Fracking Nightmare, but it's very relevant because the mantra of the MPs and the pro-fracking community very much revolves around energy security. And of course, right now, that's perhaps very much a debatable issue, unless you think that Norway is going to become radicalized anytime soon. But if things kick off in Syria, if Syria does become the catalyst for global conflict, then of course, the agenda of energy security is going to be forced down everybody's throats in the UK. And basically, it is going to be a case of, okay, we're going to do the Syed Javid approach, and we're not even going to actually go through the charade of council applications or local council applications, county council applications. We're just going to say, this is so crucial. It's a matter of national security. Get your bits in the ground. Go drilling. To hell with the consequences.
Yeah, I think that's an absolute taken. That will happen.
So,
no question.
Needless to say, that's not a subject that I think that too many of the anti-fracking groups around the country will have had. But depending on what happens over the next few days, because even in the what would appear to be unlikely event, but there again, I thought the same about the EU referendum result, and that turned out to go the opposite way to that which I expected. So, stranger things have happened. But even in the unlikely event that Trump does somehow manage to come through, then I think that the next 2 months are going to be absolutely catalytic, because what Obama and his handlers will be able to unleash in the 2 months prior to Trump being sworn in on the White House lawn, they could, of course, aim to leave him with a seriously poisoned chalice.
Yeah.
So
that's
interesting
about all
times.
I can say, because we need this result in, and then we can start commenting on it.
We do. So meanwhile, we'll assume that we carry on the current trajectory, and that the primary opponent is the British government and, of course, the unconventional gas industry. Well, I shall be, voice permitting, but I shall be in Dorking in Surrey tomorrow, presenting the shorter version of Voices from the Gas Fields, and then delivering a short presentation, and then with a Q&A. Now, I have made the observation on previous episodes of Fracking Nightmare that the industry sees Surrey and North Lincolnshire as open doors. The level of coherent opposition across the Weald and across North Lincolnshire, unfortunately, does not compare yet with the opposition that has been mounted in the north of the England. Now, obviously, the north of the England has been, had environmental warfare unleashed upon it, because the entire north of England has been targeted for unconventional gas exploitation. But in the south, at the moment, it's just selected pockets. And of course, we're hearing the same mantra that we heard previously from Quadrilla and iGas, particularly in places like Balcombe and Barton Moss. We're not fracking. But actually, when you take a deeper look, no pun intended, at the longer term agenda, then it's clear that what they are trying to do is get the bits in the ground by claiming that they are only going for the conventional resources, but they are using the conventional resources to generate cash flow, because all of these companies are in a world of hurt right now, to generate cash flow to then enable them to drill deeper into the unconventional geology. And tomorrow in Dorking, we'll be looking at Europa, who are the primary license holders at Leith Hill, an area of outstanding natural beauty. In fact, just a few miles from the town of Epsode, where I was born and raised. So it's obviously an area that is very close to my heart. And yet, Leith Hill, an outstanding area of natural beauty in southern England, being targeted for this abomination.
Yeah, well, you just get the feeling, Ian, that across the country at the moment, it doesn't matter what goes on, whether it's building works. So here just outside Plymouth, we've got a new town being built. Plymouth, many would say, needs major regeneration. It never happens in the city, but we're going to greenfields for a new town. Prince Charles is going to take part of that build, we understand. And then you drive around the country, and what do you see? Massive roadworks everywhere you go. Some people from overseas have said you come to Britain and the whole of the islands is a massive building plot. So I think it just fits the picture. It's like the country's being decimated.
Well, and people being,
order.
particularly in the north, people being driven, ultimately driven into the cities, which then, of course, feeds straight into the city's state agenda.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are many people watching this who won't be familiar with that, but this, of course, is a derivation of Agenda 21 moving on to Agenda 30 to actually find multiple ways to force people out of the countryside, off the land, into the cities. And we're seeing this, obviously, in a much more accelerated form in the Western United States. But, this is a massive part. And the fact that, the area will be unattractive. So people in the first instance, won't be looking to move into these areas. And then once the contamination and the negative health impacts become apparent, then those who do live in those areas will be desperate to get out.
Yeah. That's it. It's simple.
It is very simple, unfortunately, when you look at it. So, there's so much to play for. Well, in response to Saeed Javid's ruling of overturning the Lancashire County Council decision to deny Quadrilla the opportunity to drill and frack at Prestony Road and Rossiter, there will be a rather large event this coming Saturday in Manchester. And there's a number of different bodies coming together to pull this event on. But there are coaches coming from all over the country. Coaches from Scotland, from Wiltshire, from Somerset, from East Yorkshire, from obviously the west of Lancashire, from Gloucestershire. So I am anticipating that this is going to be a very, very significant event. I mean, the last Manchester event was, I think, March of 2014, and there was easily 5,000 people there. I think this will probably be larger. Of course, the BBC will report it as about maybe 300 people.
Yeah, but it's wonderful to see people travelling, people coming together. They might not have 100% the same sort of interest or focus, but you've now got people coming together for a cause. Stays peaceful, it's more powerful, in my opinion, than if there's trouble. And this is what we really need, which is people getting away from those television sets and saying, I'm going to get out there and make my voice heard. So I think this is, again, very encouraging to see.
Well, it's a wonderful opportunity for people to network, for sure. So, I mean, it may not have perhaps the value that people hope in terms of raising awareness on a national basis, but the networking opportunity of people sharing ideas off of social media, which are all monitored, of course. So, there's a tremendous value in that.
And there'll be a police presence, and people get an opportunity to talk to those police and get ideas across and what the concerns are, and it spreads. So I think it's brilliant. Well done.
Well, I'm certainly not involved in any way, shape or form in the organisation of this event, but I shall be doing my level best, of course, to
help report it.
Yeah, to help report it.
Absolutely.
Being in Manchester at the weekend, I have to excuse my voice. It's sort of struggling a little this evening.
Yeah.
Anyway, not even a couple of weeks ago, where does the time go? Last weekend before last, I was in Easingwold in North Yorkshire to witness a panel discussion that was put on by the Easingwold community. And it was financed primarily by these two gentlemen. Well, by their companies or by their funds, their public funds, whatever. Tom Pickering of INEOS and Kevin Hollingbrake, the MP of Rydale. And Easingwold is right over on the western edge of the constituency. Now, in previous issues, we focused very much on Third Energy, who might actually get a mention during the course of the programme, because, of course, Third Energy are the company that has permission to frack an existing well at Kirby Misperton, just on the edge of the village there. But this was in Easingwold, which is under an INEOS licence. Now, INEOS are a very interesting company. Have you come across INEOS at all, Brian?
I'm going to say no. My knowledge in this area is not brilliant. So,
well, that's what INEOS rely on, of course.
Right.
I mean, it's what INEOS absolutely rely on. In fact, INEOS is primarily the private domain of an entrepreneur by the name of Jim Ratcliffe. And over the last 20 or so years, he's bought up various assets from companies like ICI, BP, refineries, chemical works, and pulled them into the INEOS empire. Now, at this event in Easingwold, what was very interesting was that Kevin Hollingbrake was primarily using energy security as the justification for pushing ahead. And in fact, one of the speakers from the floor actually quite blatantly accused Kevin Hollingbrake of effectively abandoning his constituents. In fact, betraying was the word used, betraying his constituents, because whereas 90+% of the constituents had let it be known that they did not want unconventional gas exploitation within their community, Kevin Hollingbrake has effectively taken on the mantle of intermediary between the government, the unconventional gas industry, and the community. And it's very clear, although he obviously tries to articulate it on the basis, well, he's got a responsibility as an MP to look at national issues as well as just the local issues. But what was interesting, of course, was his focus was national security.
Yeah, this attitude is increasing. The MPs, these are leaders. They regard themselves as leaders, and due to their life experience and training, and they're in Westminster, they know better than ordinary people. And while we might have these concerns, they actually know more, and they've got to lead us to the right viewpoint. So I think this elitist arrogance, I call it arrogance, I think it is arrogance, this is increasing in MPs. You're seeing it more and more. We are the little people. We may get upset over things. We may think we know what's going on, but actually, trust us, we're in Westminster and we'll sort it out for you. This is you can watch it all over the place. We see it with our own Gary Streeter MP here in for South West Devon, who wrote a letter to a paper where he said, well, people might have this strange conspiracy idea they're shutting down the NHS, that the Conservatives are shutting down the NHS. This isn't true, of course. Well, NHS is virtually privatised, so it's absolutely true. And then he said, and we all believe different things. So truth is really,
whatever you believe.
Whatever you believe. So if you're unsure as to, what's inside the mind of a politician, just have a little look in Gary Streeter's head and you'll see this amazing arrogance.
Well, it's very interesting that you mention the NHS as well, because, one of the justifications that Kevin Hollingbrake offered, he's actually been across to Pennsylvania, but I wouldn't suggest that it was a balanced trip. It was obviously clearly to come up with the lie, come up with the reasons why people in his constituency should simply accept this.
No, I said the line, actually.
Oh, the line. The lie, it is the lie.
Because this is the word they use, what the line is. They're not following what they believe. They're following what the government line is. And we see increasingly now that whatever the Conservative Party, and that means the Conservative Party whips, say the MPs are to believe, that's what they trot out. and they're not going to follow what their constituents say. Over the Brexit vote, this came to the surface, didn't it? That MPs were being told, well, don't take any notice of your constituents. Well, they're all controlled.
Well, and now they'll have an opportunity to maybe use that. Well,
yeah,
we'll see how that pans out. But what was interesting at the meeting was that Kevin Honninrake was making reference to the lack of evidence that people had suffered significant negative health impacts in the areas that he visited in Pennsylvania. Now, despite the fact there are multiple academic studies now freely available which actually prove the lie of that observation. But one point that has been raised with me by people in the US is that, of course, the health statistics are going to be skewed because there are many people in these communities in the gas fields of the US who can't afford healthcare.
Yeah.
So they get sick and they suffer. And then if they die, then there's no actual attribution to the death being in any way related to the gas industry because they weren't seeking any medical attention.
Yeah.
And that's the situation that, of course, we will have in the UK soon, that there's going to be an increasing number of people who will not be able to afford medical care, or under the guise of the NHS, it will be deferred for so long because they haven't got the resources to deal with it. It'll be deferred for so long that people actually pop their clogs in the meantime.
We're seeing this more and more, that people can't actually get treatment. The waiting lists for operations or specialists are increasing and increasing. So that's skewing all the statistics, but this is absolutely happening. And then we can actually talk about the bodies coming out of the NHS and publicly reported statistic, which one doctor is talking about, is 130,000 unnecessary deaths of elderly people in the NHS per year. So, yeah.
Only 130?
130,000.
Oh, 1,000. Yeah,
130,000.
130,000. Yeah. That really doesn't surprise me at all because, we clearly have a corporatist-driven government that has absolutely no interests in the health and the well-being of the people of this country. And if they're not actually making a direct contribution to the corporatocracy...
You are a useless eater.
A useless eater, in the words of Henry Kissinger.
Yeah.
Well, so interestingly, let's go back to these two individuals, Kevin Honninrake and Tom Pickering. So whilst Kevin Honninrake focused a significant amount of his argument on the energy security issue, not too surprisingly, Tom Pickering remained somewhat silent on that issue. And I wanted to see whether anyone in the audience picked up on this, because this is something that is absolutely fundamental, because INEOS are the most significant holder of unconventional gas exploitation licenses in the UK. And INEOS are not planning, and to be honest, they've been really quite transparent about this. It's just a case of it hasn't been picked up, it doesn't seem. But they have no intention of mining the gas for the benefit of the country, i.e. energy security. Their sole purpose in mining the gas is to provide feedstock for their chemical and refinery facilities in Falkirk, on Humberside, and on Merseyside. So INEOS are effectively looking to put a significant tranche of the country at serious risk, all on the back of trying to achieve greater profitability for the corporation, which is a private company. It's a privately owned company. So the bottom line is that the country gets zero benefit, because I'm also sure that if we look at the tax structure of INEOS, it will be structured in such a way to be tax efficient. And that, of course, is why Jim Ratcliffe, depending on who he's talking to, he's either a Manchester boy or a Beverley boy so he's either Manchester or East Yorkshire. But that's why he was living in Switzerland up until quite recently, obviously, to be tax efficient. And I'm sure INEOS have some remarkable tax accountants, and I'm sure that they do an extremely good job of tax efficiency. But this is a totally different animal to what Kevin Hollinrake is presenting as energy security.
We're seeing this close collaboration is the right word, aren't we, between big business and MPs and Parliament. It's in our faces everywhere we go. Are the MPs working in the best interest of their constituents, or have they got some other financial deal or shares or whatever it is in big business? And I think you just see the big business driving the MPs as to what the decision is. And then, of course, it's impacted on the constituents and the general public.
Well, interestingly, prior to the event actually taking place, I was there quite early, and Tom Pickering came and said hi. I mean, I'd met him at an INEOS Open evening in Falkirk, and he came along to the screening of Voices from the Gas Fields in Falkirk, so we have met previously. But I asked him if he would be up for a public debate in the guise of a formal debate along the lines that we did in Harrogate a few weeks ago. And he said, well, drop me a line. So I'm going to do that. We'll see if Tom Pickering of INEOS is up for a public debate. But this is a key issue, and it's one that absolutely needs to be addressed by every targeted community, i.e. every community in the INEOS sacrifice zones. Because your community is being put at risk not for the country's benefit of energy security, but for the benefit of the corporation of INEOS. Now, I'm sure that following this discussion, INEOS will probably revisit their policy. They say, well, actually, no, we're going to do it on a percentage basis. They'll come up with some justification for still getting in there, mining the gas, on the basis that it's going to be sort of shared between the government. But let's make no bones about it. Their priority is corporate profitability. And if you're in a community, you have to ask yourself the question, are you prepared to let the corporatocracy ride roughshod over your community just purely on the basis that they can get the gas from underneath your community rather than have to ship it in from elsewhere?
Yeah. A little expression that a gentleman gave me earlier this evening was that constituents should be recalling their MPs home. And when I said to him, what do you actually mean by that? He said, well, basically people should be demanding that their MPs return home so that they can be questioned by the public. What are you doing in Parliament? What are you standing up for? What are you doing for us? So that instead of them being there in the great empire up there in London, people are saying, no, you get yourself back here in front of the constituents, in front of ordinary people, so that they can be questioned publicly about what they're doing. And I thought that was a pretty powerful statement. And I like the expression, we need to call them back home.
And put them under scrutiny.
Yeah, under scrutiny.
Yeah. And, I mean, obviously, this was the closest I've seen to Kevin Hollinrake be put under scrutiny. But Kevin Hollinrake is a newcomer to Parliament. This is his first term in office. And he replaced the previous incumbent, a lady by the name of Anne McIntosh, who was given a seat in the Lords. But she was vehemently anti-fracking. And my considered opinion...
She was bought off.
She was bought off.
Yeah.
She was asked to, given the opportunity to be elevated to the Lords, become a life peer, and the security that goes with that role. And in comes Kevin Hollinrake. Now, the irony here is that, you know, he makes a bunch of money from his estate agency business, because he is the owner of Hunter's Estate Agents.
Right.
But it's a national company, and the fact that property prices in one small part of his estate agency empire will be impacted by this is probably an irrelevance to him.
Yeah.
Sad, but true. So that's the takeaway. I have to say the meeting was chaired very well by a lady by the name of Helen Robinson, who I believe is a lawyer. And the meeting in general was sort of kept on an even kill. But the takeaway message, even from the chair, was regulation, regulation, regulation. And the message from both Kevin Hollinrake and Tom Pickering was basically, look, it's going to happen. Deal with it, because one way or another, we're coming into your community. Syed Javid has demonstrated that he will do precisely what he's told by his paymasters, and we discussed that in the previous episode of Fracking Nightmare. He will do whatever he is told. He will ride roughshod over local democracy. And as we've discussed before, localism, Brian. Yeah. Localism does not mean local democracy.
Absolutely not. That's the great lie of David Cameron and Mr. Pickles, Communities Minister, as was, where he said that basically, one, he was a revolutionary. I may look like an unlikely revolutionary, but the revolution starts here. That's Mr. Pickles. And what was he talking about? Overturning everything to do with the constitution, the way the country was organised. And this is all on the basis of more power to ordinary people. But actually, what's it doing? It's dropping a net of government control to the lowest level.
So it's actually created a situation where government departments are moving into the same buildings as some of the key county council or city council offices, so that government policy can hold sway within the district, county or city.
Yeah, but that's actually been going on for very many years. You can see that the moment you had local authority politics brought into the party domain, Labour runs Plymouth or the Conservative runs Plymouth, for an example. So you had the information coming in from central government via the parties, but now what you're doing is you're merging all of the authorities in one big blob. So the police are coming in with a local authority, the fire service is coming in, mental health is coming in. So the whole thing is locked together. There's no separation of powers. And what the government says is policy then comes all the way to the bottom.
So this is when we see the multiple agencies getting involved, targeting families who have the audacity to want to challenge government policy.
Yeah, so you're dealing here with fracking, but if you deal with development, which is causing a lot of problems for a lot of people building in the countryside, local people attempt to protest it. What happens is there'll be some form of planning review, but then ultimately it goes to the government inspector. Well, who does the government inspector side with? 99 times out of 100, they're going to side with the government over what their development policy was in the first place. So democracy an illusion, and more control just dumped down over local people. That's why he's so confident. You better just get used to it, because this is going to be what it's going to be.
Well, needless to say that people are starting to get out and actually sort of show their disgust. And the week before last was Barclays Week. And this is where anti-fracking communities right across the country took their disgust that Barclays are the 97% owner of Third Energy, the company that's looking to frack the existing well at Kirby Misperton. And this was in the London branch of Barclays. And this is the family that we discussed in the previous episode, where they had taken their sofa and their table into the Moulton branch of Barclays in North Yorkshire. But here they are outside the branch of Barclays in London. Now, Barclays are not the only bank to have a significant interest in unconventional gas exploitation. And obviously the purpose of these 100+ events around the country was to raise awareness in those communities. But unfortunately, you see, it's a great way of raising awareness, but the establishment sees this as sort of a social safety valve. You know, it's people letting off their steam, it's people sort of expressing their discontent, but in the wider scheme of things, it's just something to...
Yeah, the establishment sees that at the moment, Ian, but this is just a question of numbers. that when this goes on a greater scale, all of a sudden it's tipping into something a lot more dangerous to the establishment because knowledge is spreading. And I think the beauty about these sorts of demonstrations is we've got, in the nicest terms, ordinary people behaving in a very reasonable and respectful way. So other people are likely to engage with them. They're likely to be curious. They're likely to speak with them. Whereas if the angst is there, many members of the public are going to walk around that demonstration. So I think this is the right approach. We just need a lot more people doing it. And of course, more people who do it, the more confident they feel and a better result. So the establishment, cocky at the moment, but you start to multiply the numbers by 10, by 100, they are going to stop being cocky pretty quickly.
Well, and the other interesting factor is that a lot of the people participating in these events have never done anything like this before. So it is not the usual suspects. I mean, this is Middle England.
Genteel people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is important, isn't it? Because they are learning the lesson of action conquers fear. So they've discovered something, they got passionate about it, now they've decided, yeah, we're going to do something. The moment they've done it once, they'll do it again, and they're going to teach other people how to do it.
Well, and for many people as well, the anti-fracking issue has been a portal. And whereas for many of the community, it's been like the first time they've ever really felt sufficiently motivated to challenge the establishment, certainly as directly as this. But they're actually now starting to take a look at other issues. You know, they're looking at the banking fraud, the legal fraud, the mortgage fraud, and of course the whole issue of parliamentary sovereignty. Yeah. So it's an education.
What is the establishment ultimately frightened of? Exposure. That's the first thing. People actually can see what they're doing, and then the next bit is that they are orchestrated in countering it. People start to get off their bottoms. They get out there and start to do something. Doesn't matter what, as long as they're doing something. That is what the establishment is terrified of. And of course, the other bit that goes with it is that as these demonstrations increase and become more effective, so people are going to jump ship, because people in Barclays, for example, are going to see those demonstrators outside and they're going to want to know why.
Exactly.
And then they go home and they start Googling fracking. Well, actually, maybe those people have got a point. Then it spreads inside.
Well, and
Barclays.
other customers.
Other customers. So the truth is so immensely powerful. You know, if you talk in terms of a weapon, if I go back a few years, I could find it quite hard to say, why is this thing truth so powerful? Now you can see it, because you can spread truth back in these organisations and it causes them immense problem. Whereas what's the other side doing? Constantly lying over the statistics, lying over the benefits. And what do you have to do when you lie? Tell more lies. So I think these sort of, I'm going to call them genteel, but I'm not mocking them. These genteel demonstrations, I think, are the right way of doing it. We just need it multiplied 1,000 times.
Well, another way to do that is maybe look at another bank, because it's not just Barclays. And in fact, I think HSBC are probably rather grateful that Barclays has been receiving so much attention, because we're going to take a short break. And in this break, I'm going to play a video that was produced over 4 years ago, which was looking at the involvement of HSBC and its support of the unconventional gas industry. And I'll be showing a particular case of where that's applicable right now after the break.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to.
What do you know about fracking?
I don't know much about it at all, I'm sorry.
Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's
Fracking is called hydraulic fracturing, basically. And what it involves is kind of drilling down to the shale rock deposits underneath the earth to split them open to get the gas out. But the issue is that they do this by injecting millions of gallons of water underneath the ground. filled with kind of carcinogenic chemicals. And there's in a lot of places, especially in the US, and there's evidence to suggest that basically the chemicals leak into the water aquifers and poison our water supplies.
Fracking is known for causing earthquakes in Lancashire and Flamwell tap water in the USA. What it's about, like, it's hydraulic fracking.
Yeah.
So they got to pump something in to get something out.
What do you know about fracking?
I just know that it's potentially quite damaging.
And would you vote for something like this to go ahead?
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because I think they ought to be investigating far more seriously wind power and certainly wave power,
Yeah.
particularly in this country that's an island.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. We've got loads of every. And even if you're looking at it from economic terms, the government loves to do, all the evidence suggests it's going to be much more expensive as well. So it's just like, not only are you going to wreck the local environment.
Do you think the alternatives are for that?
Take you away, we better stop.
But there are big companies behind it, silly.
What would you say to your MP?
Don't do it.
What you know about fracking and...
Well, obviously I've heard a fair bit about it actually, so yeah, it doesn't seem like a very sensible thing to do really, considering like we are going to be running out anyway of fossil fuels.
Okay.
And I just think it's a bit of a kind of delaying the inevitable really, isn't it? We're going to run out, so we basically need to invest in something that's going to be like renewables to make sense. I know it's a bit of a buzzword, but it's... I've heard stories in the States and in Australia where they've had fracking for some time, and actually the chickens coming home to roost basically, because basically they're contaminating water, it's poisonous water, it's obviously damaging crops, damaging livestock. So yeah, it's just madness.
If everybody's wrong, young people speak.
What would you say to your MP about fracking?
I'd say no fracking basically. I just think it's ludicrous. I think it's insanity basically.
Putting yourself in a position of an MP, would you vote for something like this?
I'd probably lean towards no, but obviously you'd have to know the consequences more in depth.
Would you vote for fracking?
I probably wouldn't.
Mostly say hooray for our side. It's time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going on.
I've done A-level geology, I should know it. Right.
Paranoia strikes deep.
And welcome back to part 2 of Fracking Nightmare. And my guest tonight is Brian Gerrish of UK Column. And that was a video produced by Frack Off. And you can just push Frack Off into any search engine and you can take a look at their website. There's some outstanding information on there, and particularly the maps that they have, which show all of the targeted areas and the companies that hold those license. As also a list of the various anti-fracking communities which are springing up at an incredible rate right across the country. But that video was put out by Frack Off back in, I think, late 2012. I became aware of it just before I started the Fractured Future Tour, the 63 dates that I did around the country, trying to raise some awareness of this in communities across the country before Quadrilla actually got their bits back in the ground at Balcombe in August of 2013. But here's HSBC, which Frack Off were drawing the attention to in that video. And one of the companies that I'm going to be focusing on tomorrow at the presentation in Dorking is Europa Oil and Gas. Now, Europa are AIM listed, but they're a very ambitious company. And they hold a number of offshore licenses off of Western Ireland. But they also have a number of drilling prospects in the UK. And we'll look at those in a second. But here is from the Europa website. And you see here the shareholdings in the company greater than 3% as of 17th of August of this year. And top is HSBC Global Custody Nominee Limited. And this is obviously a fund, and they hold 14.5%. And then HSBC Client Holdings, which is obviously another fund, has another nearly 4%. So that's 18.5% of Europa is held by HSBC. And so those people who have accounts at HSBC, if you're concerned about unconventional gas, then I think it's obviously time that, like your colleagues who have accounts at Barclays, is go have a conversation with your local branch and ask them the question. Of course, the branch managers and the staff there are not going to have the first clue of what you're talking about, but the information's freely available on the Europa website. So print it out, take it along to them, and ask them the question, and ask them to get answers for you, because that forces them to take it to a more senior level of management, and that will then cause ripples if enough people do it.
Yeah, key. I think the questions can be very gentle. We're feeling concerned about these investments. You haven't got to cause instant trouble with a bank. It can be done very gently. We're concerned to see that HSBC is involved with this sort of thing, and we'd like some clarification of what these investments are for. Where's that going to go? Straight back through customer services, and that's going to end up at board level pretty quickly. But 2 or 3 people doing it, as you say, and isn't going to make the difference. 100 people, 200 people, that's going to get to board level pretty quickly, because they're going to say, we could have 2,000 people asking this question in no time at all. So this is soft, gentle protest, but I think when enough people do it, it's very powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Gentleman's campaigning.
Well, you know, it's excuse me, it's Middle England. It's not the usual suspect.
Yeah, well, that's what makes it so dangerous for the company, for the bank, because they're not used to Middle England suddenly starting to ask questions.
Ask questions, yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm suffering.
You're surviving, eh?
I'm getting there.
Yeah.
Well, this is the area that we'll be looking at tomorrow. This is the Weald Basin. And this is, within the Weald Basin, there are some stunning areas of outstanding natural beauty, which of course means Jack, as it were, to Savid Yayed. Because the bottom line is that it doesn't really matter what the local authority determine. I mean, we have one application down on the west of Sussex, on the West Sussex-Hampshire border in Markwells Wood, where even the Environment Agency have said that they actually have concerns about the potential of fracking in that area because of the aquifer, which supplies much of Portsmouth and the surrounding area. So it's going to be interesting to see whether Said Yavit actually doesn't overrule on even the Environment Agency.
Yeah.
But hey, you know, stranger things have happened, because we've proven that they don't care about the ecology.
Well, this is the thing. When you look at what the Environment Agency is supposed to do, which is protect the environment, all of a sudden on this issue, it's like we're not going too close to this. And yet, I did a little bit of study many years ago with the Camborne School of Mines. Part of that was hydrology, looking at water systems. And of course, very, very fragile, because you get pollution in one area and the next minute it's tracked across to another area. Mm-hmm. And here you are injecting substances in amongst aquifers and in amongst rocks, which are porous in many cases. Sometimes, I accept the geology is different, but in many cases you can't predict what's going to happen. They say they can predict, but they can't actually predict.
No, exactly. And in fact, Graham Warren, who's a hydrologist based in Kent, he sits on the committee of Campaign for the Protection of Rural England in Kent.
Yeah.
And hey, we've got some lights out.
Interesting.
Yeah. And he has stated categorically that as a hydrologist, you know, anyone who tells you that we have a absolute definitive understanding of underground water flow in this country is actually delusional. Because we don't. You know, we think we've got an idea, but we don't actually have a detailed map of the interconnectivity of our underlying hydrology.
So something as delicate as that, something as important as that, you would expect the Environment Agency to be in there with a rod of iron, making sure that there is at least a proper debate and a look at the evidence for and against, but that's not happening.
It's not happening. And the water companies themselves, in some cases, because they're foreign owned, and they're actually just looking at the bulk sale, because we're talking millions of gallons of water. So they're looking at the bulk sale opportunity. And then, okay, so, you know, hey, get a bulk sale opportunity out of it. And then if we cut and run in a few years.
Doesn't matter.
You know, because they say they're foreign owned anyway. So the Weald Basin, it's a very sad observation to make. But unfortunately, it's the case at the moment. And that is that there is not sufficient resistance. There is not sufficient awareness in the southeast of England to be able to mount a coherent and comprehensive challenge to this industry. Now, obviously in the north of England, where the focus has been, it goes right across the country, so it's literally affecting every community. In the south of England, I think a lot of what it comes down to is that community doesn't exist anymore.
Well, that will be true in some areas, but this particular area, I think the problem you've got is very wealthy. So these are, if I look at that area there, I'm going to say, in general, that's a pretty wealthy area. So you've got people who are into their own lives. They're not mixing in local communities the way people may be doing that up north. So to educate these people, it's more or less getting into every household or the local golf club, perhaps.
Or finding that the value of their property has been seriously impacted.
If something's going to hurt them in that thing, then they'll pay attention. But unless it actually impacts on, or they can see it's going to impact on them, they don't want to know because they're living this bubble. They've got the money, they've got the pension, they've got the house. We're okay. So it's getting that message across. Once the message is across, whoa, I think you're into a different thing, because they are the people who are going to be into the local Conservative association, banging on the table, asking what the hell's going to going on. We're going to deselect, you know, the MP. So once they're awake, they are going to go in very strongly. But it's how you get into these rather posh communities to get them awake.
Well, all is not lost, because the industry is in very much an embryonic state in the southeast. So, you know, with a couple of exceptions like Horse Hill, then like in Leith Hill, the pad hasn't even been built yet. So there's a long way to go.
Maybe we're just giving a part solution there. You should target the golf courses.
Maybe we should, absolutely. And I mean, obviously in the media, it's getting some coverage, and this is the purpose of the protection community. Absolute chaos as police shut Horse Hill. That's from earlier this year. And this was the direct action, or examples of the direct action that were being undertaken in an attempt to raise awareness amongst the local community. Because, you know, Leith Hill, an area of outstanding natural beauty, this is what is coming to you.
I know, you look at it, like something out of Cape Canaveral, isn't it? And you imagine that multiplied, what, 10, 15, 20 times across an area. It's lost for words.
Well, Tom Pickering said they were looking, you know, to establish sort of 10 well sites across 10 square, 100 square kilometres. But interestingly, within the area he was talking about, there's a lot of area that's not accessible because it's urban or it is protected. But, you know, Leith Hill, or the wooded area between Holmwood and Leith Hill, an area of outstanding natural beauty, which is fed by country lanes that you can barely get an ordinary bus up, a small bus up, and they're looking, you know, at 70 plus vehicle movements a day to bring this industrialisation into an area of outstanding natural beauty.
Yeah, it's astounding, isn't it, when you start to look at it on this scale of what's being brought in and what it's going to look like and what it's going to do. But the government wants it to happen, so you better get used to it.
That's the message.
Right?
You know, Look, you can go through all your opposition, you can go through your objections at planning, but eventually we're just going to ride roughshod over you and do it.
Unless you stand up to be
Well,
counted.
this is where it has to be that no means no. And by the way, there is a delay on the well site at Leith Hill, not just because there's a camp there, but I'm pleased to say a camp has been established on the site. But Europa have made a supplementary planning application to turn this area of outstanding natural beauty into a veritable fortress. And they want to put this kind of razor wire. In fact, they want to put a double layer of fencing and then obviously the razor wire on the outer layer to prevent any incursion onto the well site.
Nice.
So yeah, beautiful. You walk, you take your family out for a walk in the woods on a Sunday, and you come across this obscenity. Yes, it's interesting times, and well, look, we're coming to the end of our hour. It actually went fairly quickly. I just want to revisit the fact that we have this event on Sunday, and on a previous episode of Fracking Nightmare, I had young Morgan Marshall, who's an outstanding activist. He's obviously supporting his parents, or his parents are supporting him. But for those viewers who saw the interview that I did with Morgan will know that he's extremely well informed. He's done his research, but sadly at school he's probably identified on the prevent listing.
Yeah.
But anyone who challenges the orthodoxy of government today is potentially on that listing. So don't worry, Morgan, you're in good company.
Yeah, exclusive club. Get on board.
It is an exclusive club. Brilliant. Well, look, we're going to take a short break. We're coming very much towards the end of the programme. So after this break, I'm just going to basically say a few words before we close out. But just take a look at this, because this is young Morgan Marshall. In addition to his anti-fracking activities, he's also an extremely talented musician. And his father sent me this video and gave me permission to play it tonight. And Morgan will actually be performing this little piece at Manchester on Saturday. And the title of it is Do You Hear the People Sing? So take a look at this. So I think you're a bit of a violin player yourself, aren't you, Brian?
I'm trying hard. I'm a late starter, so I've been trying for whatever it is now, 5 years. And obviously it's something better that you do when you're young because your joints are supple. But nevertheless, that was really good.
Outstanding. Well, Morgan will be there, and hopefully there'll be a massive choir to sing along with him on Saturday. And just look at the details again. That's the National Anti-Fracking Demo this coming Saturday the 12th of November in Manchester, and everyone meeting at Piccadilly Gardens. That's M61AY. And just a reminder again, I will be back in Dorking tomorrow night. I'll be resting my voice up overnight, but be back in Dorking to be discussing what's occurring or not occurring in the Weald, and in particular at Leith Hill. Now, meanwhile, Brian, UK Column, you put out daily news bulletins.
We do, indeed. Yeah, 1 o'clock every day, 45 minutes, sometimes to an hour if we've got a guest on. And we're talking about all sorts of things going on in UK. A lot of it is analysis of what's happening politically, but we're also covering the banks, and we're also covering news from America and other locations overseas.
So if you want to catch up on some analysis of what is or isn't being said in the mainstream media, then tune in at 1 o'clock to ukcolumn.org/live. Well, Brian, I said it was going to be a short show tonight because my voice was struggling, but the hour has slipped by.
It's gone very quickly. But I think overall, Ian, I think it's brilliant, isn't it? People are starting to move. They're doing it in the right way. So they're learning, they're doing their research, they're getting out there, they're making new friends, they're meeting people who are perhaps passionate about other subjects. And we are starting to see the wider population beginning to move, get away from those TV, and we've got some good music to go with it. So that's got to be all good stuff, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Life can be pretty gloomy when you get into some of these areas, but then when you start to see people who are doing things, and you go to events and you meet people who are new, excited, and they're getting interested, it makes it all worthwhile. Can we beat these people that are causing the problem? I think we can. We just need enough people to get out and be active.
Absolutely. So and it would be wonderful if people in a community even did even if it was a monthly program on YouTube just about what's going on in their area.
Or give the video clips, because if they need help pushing it out, what we're always desperate for is sort of photographs of what's happening, maybe little audio reports or little video clips of what people are doing. And where is the audience? Well, we know that for this tonight and the UK Column News, it's not only people in UK, there's people in the States watching. There's people
Australia.
Australia. South Africa, all over the place. So, this is the power of the internet. Get the information out.
Exactly. Well, thanks very much for joining me tonight, Brian. Thanks for the conversation. And I shall be back with you next week, hopefully with my throat back in good condition. I'll be back with you next Monday at 9 o'clock. So thanks for joining us tonight. See you next week.
Bye-bye.